Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Slow Art Friday. My name is Christy McMillan. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Asheville Art Museum, and I am joined by two of our wonderful docents today, Sylvie Horvath and Michelle Weitzman Dorf, who will be leading today's conversation. Just a few notes before we get started. Each Friday at 12, docents lead virtual interactive conversations about a few artworks in our collection or special exhibitions. The goal is simple: slow down, discover the joy of looking at art, and talk about the experience with others. For today's program, Sylvie and Michelle will lead us in an interactive conversation about three artworks in our collection. We'll spend about 15 minutes or so with each one. Sylvie and Michelle will allow us time to look at each work on our own, slowly, before leading a conversation about each one with questions. As participants, we encourage you to engage in dialogue with Sylvie, Michelle, myself, and each other throughout the hour. As you got logged on, you noticed that your microphones and video were muted by default. I'll make it so that you can unmute your microphones in just a moment, but we do invite you to turn on your video so that we can see who we're talking to. Choose a quiet room and close the door. Please do silence any alerts from nearby devices, as they can be distracting when your microphone is on. If you do choose to turn on your video, try not to sit in front of a window, lamp, or other strong source of light or movement. Use headphones and microphone for best sound quality. While you can log on using a smartphone, we do recommend using a desktop, laptop, or tablet to see the slides and meeting tools on a larger screen. Make sure that your screen name includes your first name and last initial, or first name and last name, again, so that we know who we're talking to. During the program, in order to ask questions or make comments, we do invite you to unmute your microphone when Sylvie, Michelle, or I ask for questions or comments. You can also type any questions or comments that you have into the chat box. A third way to participate is to raise your hand in the participant sidebar, and I will call on you and unmute your microphone. This can be a little stifling for the conversation to keep going forward, and folks can wait for a while to be called on. So please do just feel free to unmute yourself or to type your questions into the chat box. Finally, we are recording today's program, so if you prefer not to be recorded, make sure that your video and audio remain muted and use the chat box to submit any questions or comments that you have. At this time, I'm going to make it so that folks can unmute themselves. Please do leave your microphone muted unless you're actively asking a question or making a comment. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? All right, Sylvie and Michelle, what will we be talking about today? Sylvie?
Oh, I was muted.
Oh, I am too. Okay. I've been a people watcher, interested in the individuality of each person in our human species. And these three works appeal to my visual and emotional senses. They happen to be women and of different art mediums, thus the title, Women in a Material World. My name is Sylvie Horvath. I'm a touring docent at the Asheville Art Museum. Today, Michelle and I will spend 45 minutes with you interacting with three artworks. We'll spend about 15 minutes on each. Before I show you the first artwork so you may better envision it, I would like to mention the large size of it, approximately 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide. Christy? Let's take 10 seconds to look at the whole work. Well, what is going on? What in this artwork?
She seems very bold.
Now, what makes you say that?
Confident. The way she's holding her hands, you know, and sticking out her chest, kind of like a peacock would. And she's got very strong legs.
Yes, very good. Okay, so she looks very bold, the way she's holding her arms, you're saying, and the way her legs are placed. Anyone else want to comment?
It seems like she's flexing her muscles, just showing she's in power or in charge.
Yes, it does seem like she's flexing her muscles to show that she's in charge. Anyone else who would like to comment?
Her dress is very classic for the executive working woman, the black high heels, the black skirt to her knees, and the white shirt that is rolled up in a manly way. I think she's just doing a stretch between Zoom meetings.
I identified with this picture quite a bit. I think she's been in a stressful meeting. Her back's hurting, her shoulders are hurting, and she's stretching. Plus, she's not extremely happy. But yes, I'd say it's an administrator or executive. That may be just. But that was my first impression.
And what makes you feel that she's extremely unhappy?
I'm not saying she's extremely unhappy, but I think she's just very tense. And this is a stretch to get rid of some of the tension in her back and her shoulders. That was been there, done that.
Notice also that I noticed that her hair is in a pretty masculine style. It's not a curly behind her. There's a very masculine. So she has a very in control look. The thing that caught me most about this, and it may just be the way that I'm seeing it, is it appears that the bottom half is a photograph, her skirt, her legs, and the top half is a sketch. And
Yeah,
that would be the way
interesting,
it's coming through on my computer.
yes, me too. I couldn't decide if it was a photograph or a drawing for that
Agreed.
reason.
But we'll find out later what it is. But some interesting comments here. So you're finding that you're seeing some masculinity in her, in her stance, in her arms. Anything else?
I thought if it had a caption, you know, a bubble caption, it would say, and she said, yes.
Yes. Great. Anyone else have a caption for this?
Nothing like a good stretch.
Well, let's take a moment to look at the elements of art here. And how does the artist use line and direction to make this more interesting?
Well, part of the power comes from the vertical and diagonal lines, her right leg extending as she's going forward. And then you have the horizontal line of her arms right at her head level, so that it gives you, it creates a very strong triangle, inverted triangle.
Very good. Yes, it does. Anyone else want to comment on the use of line here? What about the shadowing?
Well, there's some on her legs, but there's nothing behind her. So
Does that help make, someone commented earlier that it looks like half of it is a photograph and half of it is a drawing. Do you think the shadowing creates that effect?
yes.
I think so. Also, there's no indication of the source of light, and she is essentially suspended against that very blank background.
And if you look at her knees, on both knees, left and right, it's almost like there's that where they kind of can cut you off at the knees. The way the knees look, they look like they're not functionable by that versus of the, it's kind of a triangulation in one and more of a rounding. Does that make sense? They don't look, it doesn't look normal. Those aren't normal knees the way they're being depicted right now. They're incapacitated.
Kind of looks like a drawing from a photograph to me, rather than from life.
Now, why?
Or even that they've cut it out, you know?
Collage.
Yeah.
Now, what makes you think it's a collage?
Well, just at least the bottom part, you know, if you look at the edge of the leg that would be on your right, it would be her left leg. There's sort of a very definite.
But what I see is that it's almost like, remember cutout dolls? And it looks like the skirt and the shoes have been applied like onto like a cutout doll.
Interesting.
Like a paper doll, Michelle?
Yeah, like a paper doll, and that is the photographic part of the of this artwork, and that the other was, well, actually no, the legs look like they're photographed also, but with the shadowing, yeah, it just looks like a paper doll, the bottom part.
That's really interesting because pointing out that it looks like it's half of a photograph and half of a drawing. I never noticed that until you pointed that out. So that's a very good observation on the part of the people who pointed that out.
I wonder, Sylvie, if that's because we're so drawn to her face, or at least I am. I always get so caught up in sort of her face, her expression, the way she's moving her arms, and sort of the curve of her back, which is so beautiful, that I don't think I even make it down below her skirt. It's almost as if that really bold black shape of her skirt like stops my eye.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Christine.
Yes, I was very aware of the curve of her back when I first saw this artwork. Would you want to be friends with this woman?
Who knows?
Yeah. Yes.
I think the top drawing is very real, and from waist down it looks fake.
Interesting. Now, what makes you?
Well, you can, because it doesn't look, it's very dynamic. Her pose is very dynamic, but there's something off about the bottom part.
Especially the left leg.
One of the things that I noticed, and I'm showing my age here, is that she is dressed in what we think of as professional attire, but she isn't wearing stockings.
Oh,
That's true.
And that is something in the 70s and 80s and 90s, many of us did. And so she doesn't have stockings on. So that has a real impact, at least on my eye, when I look at the totality of the picture.
now
I have
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think the arms and the legs have a lot of shadowing and definition and so on. Her face doesn't. Her face, while there's expression there, there's really nothing like the shadowing of the legs, or even the arms look more like, and I feel like there's either something missing or there's some message in that. Her face is really, except for the expression of the eyes and the downward tilt of the head, there's not shadowing there at all.
Interesting. Let me tell you that this lithograph, the inspiration for this was a series of photos that the artist took. And let me ask you, the photos were in color. Why do you think the artist chose to do it in black and white?
I think it's much more powerful.
Yeah, much more
I think it's more powerful in black and white.
Now, why do you think the black and white is more powerful?
I just think that it's color would be distracting, I think, to the emotion in the picture.
This gets into the realm more of every woman than a specific woman or person.
Now, why do you
in the
say
black
that?
and white.
Why does it get into the realm of every woman when you look at it?
It's not, if I knew whoever the person was who was photographed, this doesn't cause me to start thinking, well, I don't know, she doesn't really look like that because her hair's this or hair's that. This just takes me into the sense of woman as opposed to the individual person, and you get, or could get bogged down into her personality traits, be they good or bad or both. But this is more of a statement to me about about the women and women.
Yes, it's more generic.
I'm anxiously awaiting the title of this.
And part of that is because there is no expression on her face and no definition. So she doesn't really look so real and approachable.
Interesting. So you find her unapproachable.
Well, I mean, you can't really get an idea of her personality or anything. There's not a lot of expression and whatnot going on in her face. It's like the artist wanted to focus more on the body and the powerful image. And
I see her as more representational than an actual.
Right.
And that is due in part because of the lack of real definition in her face. It is simply a profile and it's very flat. Where the compare and contrast her face to her arms and then to her legs.
Well, I'm going to stop you here to give you some more information about this artwork. One thing I did notice that you mentioned is that in some way she's unapproachable. She's in her own space there, which I thought was really interesting. The artist is Robert Longo. And Robert Longo achieved fame in 1983 at 25 with his large-scale drawings of businessmen posing in uncanny contortions. Now, Robert Longo's series was called Men in the Cities, and it captured well-dressed business professionals in New York posing in rock star dance poses. Longo works and reworks his charcoal into thick textured surfaces, giving his velvety drawings deep blackened expanses and sharply contrasting whites. His forms are at once representational and softly elusive. He's part of what's called the picture generation. And this is a group who in the 70s and 80s appropriated images from the mass media. And Cindy Sherman is the Cindy who's photographed and who this lithograph is of. And she was living with Robert Longo for a while, from 1974 to 1980. She's a photographer in her own right, and they have remained friends. In 2009, she stated when looking at this, I see youthful optimism. Creating these poses became a sort of a dance, and I think that's why I remember having such a good time. Robert Longo was quoted in 1984 saying, "I always imagine that I want to make art that is going to kill you. Whether it's going to do it visually or physically, I'll take it either way." It's something to think about. And if you were wondering what he meant by this, we're lucky enough to have Robert Longo coming here on January 28th. We'll be in conversation with Robert Longo from 7 to 8:15, and tickets are now on sale.
Well, he's coming virtually. It's a virtual talk.
Yes, it's a virtual talk.
Well, we're super excited about it.
Yay.
And also, we have an exhibit on loan from the Whitney Museum. And if you want to see the original photo that this is based on, this artwork is based on. It will start today, excuse me, it will start today and it will be in the museum for 2 weeks. So I hope you enjoyed studying Cindy and learning about her and interacting with her. Thank you.
Oh, well, oh,
Oh, are there any questions, by the way?
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So her legs are drawn?
Yes.
They were, okay.
Yep, they are drawn. But it's interesting that you pointed out how softer her legs and arms are than the rest of the drawing. Any other questions? Well, thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to my fellow docent, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sylvie's going to be back with our last artwork. I'm going to do the middle artwork. And with that, Christy, if you can show the slide of Nina. Take a few moments to investigate this artwork from corner to corner, side to side. And note that this particular artwork, again, to give you a visual perspective, the former piece that we looked at was approximately 4 feet by 3 feet. This, in contrast, is about 5 by 6 inches. So think about that as we're slowly looking at this artwork, and then we'll open it up for conversation. First impressions, looking at this artwork, what do you see?
Well, it looks like someone, I was going to say from another country, but it could be from America, but it could also be Brazil. It could be, you know, Nicaragua.
Barbara, what do you see that has you say that?
Just the shape of her face and the color of her skin.
So she could be.
In other words, it's
Yeah.
in other words, she's not Anglo-Saxon.
Okay. Very good. Someone else?
She looks wistful in a sad way.
Mhm.
And what do you see in this that has you say she looks wistful and sad?
Something about the eyes look very sad. And the
Mhm.
mouth is not a smile, but it's not a frown either.
Mhm.
Right. So what emotion might we think she's feeling at this time?
Disinterest.
Or detached.
Detached, disinterested,
Mm-hmm.
Self-contained.
self-contained?
I see sadness and suffering somehow, and a longing to not be, a longing to be somewhere other than wherever she is.
I have a hard time seeing sadness. I see more like inquiry, curiosity, maybe some wistfulness, but I agree though that I immediately thought indigenous people from South America, but I mean, I think it could be the other like East Asian countries too. But her hairstyle struck me as South American.
Singapore, the Philippines. You know,
Pardon?
from Singapore or the Philippines or
Philippines, I thought, yeah. or the East Asian islands, but also the
India.
indigenous people of the Amazon or the Andes.
I just thought of her as a person of color, and I thought of New York, New Orleans, Los Angeles, where there's just so many types of people that it didn't not take me out of the United States. I also thought there is for me, her eyes are sad. And I thought that she had just said goodbye to her soldier, wondering when he was going to come back. And I actually thought of New York because of the hairstyle. Any style goes, or Berkeley, any style goes.
Sally in the chat box says she looks like she's focused on a memory.
She has a contemplative look, perhaps, and it's interesting. The commentary has been all over the map, which I think is so interesting in that the world has really expanded so much so that you've noticed her ethnicity, but the ethnicity is not necessarily specific, and yet we can see her in all the different areas that you specified. Could be South American, could be Asian, Indonesian, and the fact that we have her placed everywhere it's very interesting to have all the commentary. Now here's something to think about. The previous artwork that we saw was in black and white. How might your view of this change if this were in black and white?
Are you able to show the previous one? Unfortunately, I just signed on.
Oh,
Pull
sure.
that up in the video when we're done, Christine.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the ethnicity would be harder to determine.
And what has you say that? Why would it be harder if it was black and white?
Because when you look at it right now, you see a person of color. Whereas if everything was white and black, you wouldn't know if she was a person of color.
Okay. Anyone else? How would it affect you if this was in black and white? Would her expression change at all if it were in black and white?
No, I don't think so.
Even if it was in black and white, the first thing I saw was her eyes. And if I were coming into a classroom full of new students and saw these eyes, I would say to myself, there is a bright student. She is going to be a bright student in my class because her eyes are taking in so much. They're wide, and she is, whatever she's looking at, she's taking it all in.
I see her as being somewhat pensive. She's within herself. And I'm not sure I see her in any particular location, but I do think she is probably, I would guess, of some Latino, Hispanic descent. That's all.
I think the coloring is important because people are mentioning her eyes, and I focused on her eyes first, and the eyes are mostly black and white, surrounded by the color. So if it were a black and white, I don't think they would be as prominent, and our eye would be as drawn to the eyes.
Right, so the color is accentuating.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you mean, Sylvie, the application of the white ink?
The white around the eyes, and then the contrast of the eyes, and then the dark pupil, and then the different colors that are in the photograph. Oh, it's not a photograph, but in the artwork.
Yeah, I mean, that is a purposeful application of white ink. I think a lot of printmakers would tend to just sort of leave the paper without ink in the places that they wanted it to be white. But you can see that that white is, you know, purposely there here around her eyes, and also there's a little bit here in her hairline, and it really does, I think, because it is so bright white, sort of draw your eye to her eyes as well.
I think the colors, the blue in the background as well as the purple in her hair, you know, they may have significance as to being somber.
And how do those colors present being somber and that tone for you?
Well, they're colors that are associated with sadness, perhaps, and certainly the purple, you know, is passing, maybe death.
Okay.
Easter color, you know.
Easter color?
Well, I think of Easter time with the purple in the Christian church. What, wait, you're wearing a similar color silk around your neck.
It's true. My scarf does match her her hair band or whatever they're indicating there.
The artist's use of shadow, because this is either a linotype or a woodcut, it's something that has been carved out. But the contrast of the black to the skin tone is remarkable.
Say more about that, Billy.
Well, I'm looking here for one thing. Notice that the artist has used a very organic concave line under her eye, and then it's come down and it's more dense. So you get that sense of a hollow cheek. But then it carries on into the neck as well, where you might not expect it. But I think, to my eye, it all serves to, once again, to accent or bring your eye immediately to her eye, which goes into her head and her soul. This is a very soulful piece of artwork to me.
Billy, I'm also noticing that really dark shading here.
Yes.
Sort of in the curve of her brow that helps to, you said sunken cheeks, that really sort of dark shading up around her brow line makes me think of like sunken eyes too. She always just looks very sort of tired to me. You know, sort of worn out, maybe how we're all feeling right now.
That too.
I agree with Billy, and this is Laurel, and to the way the lines are by her mouth and her chin, and then also by her ear, and of course the eyebrow, and they're just very, very striking, and they bring her almost alive to you in a way that you can feel the empathy for her. And at the top of her hair by the purple, there's that little bit of white, those lines there. That's very interesting to me too. And you know, the fact that she has a braid and an earring, she's well kept, but yet has this somberness about her.
The more I look at it, the more I'm wondering if she's a Pueblo Indian. And, you know, I think about the sadness of their culture. So I think it's wonderful to stare for a long time.
I find it interesting how the artist repeats the lines and the dark in her eyebrow, and then in the whole artwork, the lines and the dark in her hair, the lines below her lip and her top lip, the dark again. I think that's very intentional.
I think it's really interesting too, in that how the shadowing and the lines look in her neck. It almost, if you were to separate that, it doesn't even look like a neck. It's like the shadowing there is, it just seems not correct to me. It seems more, I don't know, stark, if you will. It seems to me like the eyebrow and the shading on the cheek, that looks like it would be natural shadowing, but on the neck, it doesn't look as natural to me.
And then the horizontal lines of the blue behind. It's not a solid blue background.
Right.
Right, and being that it's not solid, why do you think the artist might have chosen to have it be open like that and not solid? What is that?
I think it emphasizes her face and hair and brings out the portrait rather than the background.
Yeah, she actually looks almost dimensional, like it's floating a little bit from the background.
And it almost looks like a postage stamp. Those background lines.
Yeah, and I could see it as a postage stamp of indigenous people, which we've mentioned. Could very well be. I think it would actually be a really nice postage stamp, Billy.
The background also makes me think of a weaving. Like a tapestry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Which would really speak to the ethnicity of the look of this figure.
I've been doing a lot of knitting lately, and it reminds me of my rows of knitting and each individual stitch, because it's sort of like the little bumps or circles.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to move on so that Sylvie has enough time to discuss our third artwork. And Billy had mentioned that this looked like a woodcut or linocut, and in fact, it is a linocut. And I would, again, because of the size of it, so a linocut, I'm going to bring your attention back to linoleum flooring. Okay. And so this particular artist, Elizabeth Catlett, who is no longer with us, actually she passed in 2012, she was a sculptor. And so what's interesting about the fact that she did a linocut is that she was actually more of a sculptor. She in fact taught sculpture in a college in Mexico. She's a Mexican-American artist. And her focus was very much on society, the plight of societal hierarchy, etc. So it's very poignant that all of the comments that you made about the expression on this young girl's face, niña, which of course in Spanish means young girl, and so I really enjoy this artwork and her social commentary. Is there any last comments or questions about this?
Just I note that it says 88 out of 100, so there were a limited number of these that were made.
Correct, and that is the purpose of linocuts, lithographs, serigraphs, for the purpose of them being able to be recreated. And in the art collection world, if there's a hierarchy of which one of the prints in the series one owns, and it creates value. Excuse me. Excuse me. Okay. Any other last comments? Very good. I'm going to pass it back to Sylvie.
Thank you, Michelle. That was really interesting, all the different comments. We're going to be looking at another artwork now, and I just want to emphasize that once again, this is very large. It's approximately 3 feet by 3.5 feet in width. Yes, thank you. First, I would like to give you 10 seconds to look at this carefully. And the way I want you to look at it first is looking at it as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
What is going on here? Okay, as a whole, what is going on in this artwork?
At first, I thought they were twins.
And what made you say that?
The gal on the right looks a little bit fatter is not the correct term, but you see the waist of the one on the left seems smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So then I thought they were twins, but then I tried to look and see if I could find any differences in their faces. And their ears might be just a little different. So I think that they could be twins.
Okay, so some of the similarities make them look like twins, and yet you see some differences there as well. Anyone else, when you first look at this picture, this artwork as a whole, what do you see?
The color. I mean, if they are twins, they're trying to express their individuality in color.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what do you notice about the colors and the individuality of the colors? How are they expressing their individuality through color?
Well, not just color, but a butterfly is a very different symbol than the fish that are on the other. So they're symbolically very different. The necklines are different.
Necklines are different.
The stances. And I believe these are twins.
And what
the one on the right is a little bit duller than the one on the left. It has a bright purple and also the one on the right, it looks maybe because of the red stripes up by her shoulders, but she looks like her shoulders are more slumped. You know, she's just kind of like, okay, take my picture. Whereas the one on the left looks more erect or.
Okay, so you feel that the one on the right is not too self-confident as the one on the left, am I correct?
Right.
Neither of them look too happy to either be together or having their picture taken. Or maybe it's just the general state of adolescence that we see.
I'm noticing the sleeves on the sweaters or the tops, and they're both different, but they're both similar in that they're different fabric than the bodice of the shirts. They kind of look like they're textured or and then this one looks like it's like woven with little holes, something of that nature. So at first I thought this could be the same person just photoshopped in, but it definitely, looking at the roots of their hair and some other things, it looks like that they're related but different. And the one that has the brighter colors with the fish, I almost get a zodiac sense of that, maybe Pisces with the fish or the sun below. And I mean, I have a butterfly, so I like the one on the right better. But
I agree with Laurel. I think that they are different, but the same. It struck me that if they're twins, they're trying to express their individuality, perhaps, and yet the style, the garment is similar. in other words, if they really wanted to express their individuality, one would have on a white shirt with a collar, you know, as opposed to the style to me is almost the same. I'm not saying the neckline or anything, but you know, they're still of the same thinking. That struck me like, okay, these are twins who are trying to be different, which is a twin thing, but really still within the same style framework.
But isn't that what teenage girls do? I mean, do you ever see teenage girls
Absolutely
walking down the street and, you know, they're all individuals and that they're not wearing, you know, a uniform, but they do have on a uniform. They might
That's a
have
uniform.
all on,
Exactly.
you know, skinny jeans and a tight sweater and a scarf and the same kind of shoes, but they might be in different
Exactly.
colors or textures. And so when I was looking at these shirts, I never wore shirts like this, but someone has told me that that was a big style, maybe at the time that this photograph was taken. And the shirts are very similar in that they have a cotton sort of around, you know, your chest and your back, textured sleeves, you know, some sort of different color, but slightly V-neck neck. And they're probably about the same length. And then they probably both have on jeans. So, you know, it's the same clothes that they're wearing. They just might be a little bit different colors. But, you know, I would think that if you brought in 3 of their friends, they would have on something similar, have about the same length hair, have it parted the same way. You know, I think that's just what teenage girls do. They want to be different, but not so different that they stand out. You know, it's just sort of symptomatic of this age.
I see something that I hadn't noticed before. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say one is about peace and one is about war. And if you look at the gal on the left, her with the color, yes, with the fish, the yellow design is a person holding a gun and shooting it.
Oh, I didn't even see that.
Yeah,
With her
that's
hand on her hip, right, Christine? It's sort of this arm here going down and resting on her hip, holding
And then
something
the other
too.
one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
And the legs are splayed and it looks like a bikini.
So is the
Or
is the
pubic
gun
hair.
is the gun being pointed essentially at the other girl's head?
It's
I never
pointed. I don't know if the intention is the other gal, but you know, and she's wearing a very peaceful hippie kind of t-shirt that has a butterfly, which is love and peace and transformation, whereas the other one doesn't really connect. But I'm not sure what the fish symbols with that could be, because fish is again I see Christianity again, you know, here it is. The fish was a symbol for Christianity. So, but below, I thought it was a snail, but I see it's really, the design is not attached like a snail would be.
So it's very
Makes me think of the ocean.
able to contrast the different clothes that they're wearing. I'd like to mention something about what this artist does. This artist presents 2 people side by side. It's a common practice for her. And she explains that I think it's a way of forcing the viewer to stay engaged in the image. It becomes more of a story. She forces the viewer to get stuck between the 2 subjects and creates a fictional narrative between them. So what I'm going to ask you now is, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds, and I want you to think up a story that is occurring between these 2 women here, or young girls.
I think maybe mine already was expressed with one of them having different viewpoints, political viewpoints.
Okay, let's give it a few seconds of silence as we look at and let our minds form a story. Okay, what do you think? Anyone want to tell me what their story is about the relationship between these two women?
I think one is the one that has the gun. When I look at it closely, I think of it more as she's at the beach and there's the fish and there's she's holding this little thing that looks like it has tools in it, like you would play in the sand. These make me think of, I don't know, shells or
Could be a
something.
water gun.
Yeah, so it could be a water gun that you would use when you're building a sandcastle. So you could think of it as negative, but if you look at it that way, it's positive. This is maybe summer, this could be spring or fall. They're different seasons.
To me, it looks like a mug shot. I mean, look at how wooden they're standing. That to me is unsettling. It was, my first impression was, who are these people? And, you know, I mean, look how they're standing.
And what else makes you think it looks like a mugshot? Anything else about it?
The gray background.
Arms at their side.
There's no hands. You don't see their hands at all. I mean, we're assuming that they're down at their side and not folded. And I also think it's very interesting that the hair, the style is so similar, especially the way they have it with the ears, that there's just a slight little bit over one ear and the behind the ear and falling down with a little twist at the bottom on the shoulder. So it seems to me very interesting with the hairstyles. And I'm also drawn to the fact that the V-neck with the butterfly does not have any jewelry on her neck, where she has plenty of space there to show off something, where the one on the other side has a higher neckline, and yet she has a choker or neck jewelry that is somewhat, doesn't have enough as much space to show it off. So just a few
Does that
interesting.
tell you anything about them?
Well, they're very different. And the more you look at them, at least the more I look at them, and I've looked at them in the museum as well, they look so identical at first. And then the more you look at the difference in their facial expressions, and the figure on the right has a smile, has just a smile. The one on the left does not. The one has a friendly gaze in her eyes. The one on the left does not. And so they become, the more I look at them, I'm always amazed how different they are, yet how identical they are.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'll dovetail on that too, Billy. I see the one on the right as being almost like the hippie style of the shirt, in that she's just relaxed, chill, you know, easy to be around. The other one I find not easy to be around, but definitely more intense. You know, her energy is more intense.
Well, let me tell you something about the background to this photographer, because as you can see, it's a print, it's a photograph that's been made into a print on paper. Her name is Julie Moose, and the title of this is Friends and Enemies.
Makes sense.
Coming from, I brought my children up in Newtown, Connecticut, and you're all familiar with the Sandy Hook incident, and that drew me to this photographer and artist. She was very affected by the Columbine massacre. And what she did after that is she lived in Birmingham, Alabama. She went to a private school and interviewed students, teachers, guidance counselors, studied yearbooks for months, trying to determine the relationship between students. And she took 2 students at a time. She didn't tell them in advance. She took 2 at a time and photographed them. Some of them are friends. Some of them are enemies. We don't know which. In fact, in one of the photographs, you'll see only, and this is the only photograph like that, you'll see only one boy, because the other one refused to be photographed with him. So she was very drawn by relationships, and also she wanted to show our stereotypes, the first impressions we have of people. So when we look at this, keep in mind, I had asked what the relationship is between these two women. Do you think they're friends or do you think they're enemies? And why? And we're running out of time, so I'm not going to have time to go into that, although I would love to. But if you go to the museum and see this picture or this artwork, or spend some more time with it online, think about that. Are there any questions? Go ahead. Well, let me say this is my first Flow Friday, and you've been a fantastic group to work with for the first time. And I hope you enjoyed Michelle's presentation and my presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Christy now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvie. Thank you, Michelle. It wasn't lost on me today that everyone that showed up for Women in a Material World, we were all ladies on the Zoom today. And I think that, you know, some of the really deep and intricate details that we pulled out about the way that these people were feeling or what was going on in their lives, you know, I think it's heightened by the fact that we're all ladies, and I think have a real sensitivity to what's going on or what could be going on with each other. We really do appreciate your coming today. Again, thank you, Sylvie. Thank you, Michelle. That was a really, really interesting selection of artworks. And now, like Billy said, I think I'm going to go spend some time in the gallery looking at Margot and Caroline and trying to decide if they're friends or enemies. We do not have Slow Art Friday next week. Next week is December 25th. The museum is closed. The week after that is January 1st. The museum is also closed. So it'll be 3 weeks until we meet again. January the 8th, Doris Potash, Master Docent, and Hope Warshaw, Touring Docent, we have chosen 3 artworks from our collection, our new exhibition that just opens today, Vantage Points. And all of the photographs that they've chosen show humans interacting in some way. And so as we start to feel hopefully a little bit more hopeful about what's going on in the news, that we can all start interacting again, they will sort of walk us through 3 of those artworks from that exhibition. I would highly recommend you all, if you can, coming and seeing that exhibition in person. It is on view until middle of March here at the museum, just opened today, as Sylvie said, and is a really beautiful selection of photographs from the Whitney Museum of American Art. I hope you all have a really great weekend and a nice holiday season. We will look forward to seeing you back in January. Take care.
See you next year.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, everybody.